After being reborn, I decided to change everything, starting with my college preference. Ethan often stayed on campus during weekends, so I locked myself in my room and studied tirelessly. When he brought Emily back home, I moved out. And when he decided to attend University B with Emily, I applied to University A instead. Back in my previous life before the college entrance exams, Ethan, knowing full well I hadn't stolen anything, still accused me of being a thief. He did it just to make sure that he and Emily could be together cleanly and honestly. Fine, let them be together. But clean and honest. Did they even deserve those words? Nobody knew that I had been reborn. Staring at my mock exam scores, I was on the verge of breaking down. In my past life, just before the college entrance exams, I was falsely accused of stealing Emily's watch. That accusation shattered my mental state, leading to my worst performance ever during the exams, and a result far below my usual capability. The first thing I did after being reborn was change my college preference to University A. My teacher was shocked and asked, "Didn't you always say you wanted to go to the same university as Ethan? Does he know about this?" Hearing Ethan's name, an image of his tall, protective figure flashed through my mind. Everyone always said I was unworthy of him. His family was wealthy, he was good-looking, and he was a model student in the eyes of the teachers. Meanwhile, I was just the daughter of his father's old comrade in arms, someone his family had supported out of loyalty. I smiled faintly and replied, "I don't think that way anymore. I feel like University A suits me better now." In my previous life, my mock exam scores consistently surpassed University A's cutoff. But to follow Ethan, I foolishly changed my preference to University B. My sudden decision surprised my teacher, who patted my shoulder approvingly. In that past life, Ethan and Emily orchestrated the accusation against me, claiming I had stolen Emily's watch. Emily had pulled me aside in front of everyone, her face streaked with tears, demanding justice. "Claire, I know my family isn't wealthy, and you look down on me," she had said, voice trembling. "But this watch was a gift from Ethan. I've been so careful with it. Please, I'm begging you, just return it to me." Her sobbing grew louder as she collapsed into Ethan's arms. Ethan glared at me and said, "Claire, when you were bullying Emily, did you ever think about your own background? Being poor isn't wrong, but letting poverty breed evil intentions is. Hand over the watch now, and we'll forget this ever happened." The crowd looked at me with disdain, mocking and enjoying the drama. I smiled bitterly. The boy who had once promised to protect me for a lifetime. How had he become like this? My chest felt like a boulder was crushing it. My heart ached deeply. I hadn't stolen the watch, so how could I return it? They had no concrete evidence against me, so they couldn't do much at that moment. However, I never expected Ethan, who had always been kind to me, to lock me in a room under the pretext of teaching me a lesson while his parents were away. Emily had complained about our public argument, saying it embarrassed her. Ethan told me I had always been able to endure, so a little suffering wouldn't matter. Emily, being delicate, couldn't handle public gossip. That night, the door remained locked. My nerves finally snapped. The next day was the college entrance exam. I pounded on the door and windows, screaming for help, but the only response was my own voice echoing in the vast, empty villa. In despair, I grabbed a glass from the desk and smashed it against the window without hesitation. The shards cut into my flesh, and the pain overwhelmed me. By the faint light of dawn, I sat there shivering and cold, enduring the pain. Somehow, I managed to complete the 3-day exam, but my mental state was in ruins. I performed worse than ever and ended up at a mediocre university. In the end, I died in a car accident orchestrated by Emily. I hated those two with every fiber of my being. But now I had been given another chance. I was reborn 3 months before the college entrance exams. This time I could change everything. Back at Ethan's house, I began packing my things. This villa was a wedding gift from Ethan's parents to him for when he got married. Olivia had always treated me well, but there was no longer any possibility for me and Ethan. The warmth I felt toward Olivia had to be buried deep in my heart. As I packed my belongings, I began drafting a new study plan. My gaze fell on the photograph of my dream university hanging on the wall. Hope filled my heart. As long as I stayed steady and performed well on the exams, I'd soon leave this place behind for good. That evening I cooked dinner as usual. Ethan came back as expected, with Emily trailing behind him. "Claire," Emily chirped sweetly. "Ethan brought me over again for dinner. You don't mind, do you?" Emily was petite, her oval-shaped face framed by fair skin. She looked especially pure and delicate in her white school uniform. She made herself at home, squealing with delight at the sight of the dishes I had prepared. Without hesitation, she called out for Mrs. Smith, the housekeeper, to serve the food. She got a bowl of porridge. Ethan got one. Mrs. Smith got one. But none for me. By the time I returned from the bathroom, the three of them were already seated at the table, chatting and laughing like a family. Emily took one bite and immediately spit it out. "I'm allergic to peanuts," she exclaimed, tears welling in her eyes. I leaned against the door frame watching as Ethan poured her a bowl of soup. He didn't realize until too late that it also had a peanut base. Emily left the house crying, muttering to Ethan as she went, "Claire probably doesn't like me. I won't come back anymore." Ethan escorted her to the door and returned frowning. I ignored him and sat down to eat. "You did that on purpose," he said, his voice tinged with confusion. Then, as if trying to justify himself, he added, "Emily's family is struggling. I bring her here to have a good meal, just like my family did for you all those years." I didn't reply. Ethan sighed and shook his head, as if conceding defeat. "If you don't like her, I'll take her to a restaurant next time." A week later, Ethan stayed on campus to tutor Emily. Meanwhile, I carried a thick stack of practice exams to the library. In the past, Ethan would stay home and study with me. I'd patiently guide him through each problem. But now he was focused on helping his new flame prepare for their shared future at University B. As I packed my books, I came across certificates of achievement Ethan and I had earned over the years. I couldn't help but wonder, would he be able to maintain his grades while using study sessions as an excuse for their dates? I decided to take my own certificates, my hard-earned accomplishments, and packed them into my bag. These honors were mine alone, earned through effort, not thanks to Ethan or his family. I bundled them up and left the villa for the old apartment building where I had grown up. It was far out in the suburbs, but it carried the memories of my childhood. I carefully cleaned my father's military plaque, the one he had received posthumously for his bravery. "Dad," I whispered, "I promise I'll do whatever it takes to achieve my goals." With just over 2 months left until the exams, I could already see freedom on the horizon. After that, I would leave Ethan's family behind forever. Ethan came home late that night. The dinner I had prepared sat untouched. "I ate at school," he explained casually. But the faint scent of perfume on him told me otherwise. He had eaten with Emily. He probably knew it wouldn't go over well to bring her back, so they ate out before he returned. I silently motioned for Mrs. Smith to clear the dishes and went to my room. The only belongings left in the room were some seasonal clothes and study materials. I packed the clothes into my suitcase, leaving the rest for later. Once Ethan went out on one of his dates next week, I'd pack the rest of my things. Since I was determined to build a better future, I devoted all my time to studying. While others wasted their days flirting and chatting, I poured every ounce of energy into my review sessions. I was deep into my work when a knock came at the door. I knew it was Ethan. My father had saved his father's life on the battlefield, sacrificing his own in the process. Because of this, Ethan always treated me with a level of respect. He would never enter my room without my permission. "What is it?" I asked, not wanting him to see that I was packing. He hesitated before saying, "The engagement banquet is being prepared. How about the 3rd day after the exams?" In my previous life, our engagement had been arranged according to the wishes of our parents, set to take place right after the college entrance exams. I glanced at my suitcase and replied indifferently, "There's no rush. Let's talk once Olivia gets back." Ethan stood silently outside my door for a long moment before finally walking away. I finally heard his footsteps fade, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Resting my head on the desk, I felt a sense of relief. Given Ethan's age, Olivia usually trusted his judgment more. Since I had lost both my parents as a child, Olivia took me in because of the marriage pact our parents had made. To outsiders, I was already considered part of Ethan's family, and the engagement was just a formality. Besides, Ethan was good-looking, excelled in his studies, and treated me well. It was no secret that my heart had always been his. Everyone could see it. I owed the Johnson family for raising me all these years, but I had paid them back in full, teaching Ethan tirelessly. Even in my previous life when he falsely accused me and locked me in a room, ruining my future, that was enough repayment. In this life, I owed them nothing. I was determined to walk my own path. That weekend, to my surprise, Ethan didn't stay on campus. He even brought breakfast, my favorite, century egg porridge and fried dough sticks. It was something he hadn't done in ages. I scrolled through vocabulary words on my phone as I silently sat down at the table. The only sounds were the occasional clinks of utensils against bowls. "I'll stay home with you to study today," Ethan suddenly said, breaking the silence. I looked at him in surprise and instinctively shook my head. "Don't you want me to keep you company?" he asked, frowning slightly. "You'll just be cooped up in your room all weekend." I was about to find an excuse to decline when the doorbell rang. Emily's voice came through the intercom. "Ethan," she called cheerfully. She stood at the door holding 2 breakfasts in her hands. As soon as the door opened, she tilted her head up and smiled at Ethan, effectively blocking my view of him. "Why are you here?" Ethan said. "I told you to wait for me." Emily peeked out cautiously from behind his chest. "Sorry, Claire," she said softly. "I was worried he might skip breakfast, so I came to find him." I stared at her face. So innocent and pure, just like in my previous life. No matter what she said, it could always stir Ethan's protective instincts. When Ethan heard that she had been willing to go hungry just to wait for him, he naturally followed her out in a hurry, abandoning his earlier promise to stay. So much for keeping me company. He had planned to meet her all along. I scoffed to myself. At least I didn't have to worry about making up an excuse to pack my things and leave. I pulled out my phone and checked my moving checklist. Wasting no time, I dragged my previously packed clothes and belongings out of the house and called a moving service to take them to my new apartment. Once everything arrived, I organized my things and smiled at the photos of a modest place. "Dad," I whispered, "your daughter can live just fine on her own, without relying on anyone." I spent the entire day at home studying and only returned to Ethan's house in the evening. The intense pace of exam preparation made the days fly by. Late at night, under the glow of street lights, it was always my shadow bent over books, chasing knowledge. On Friday evening, Olivia and her husband, Mr. Johnson, returned from a business trip. That Friday evening, Olivia and her husband returned from a business trip. They sat quietly on the living room sofa for a long time before letting out a deep sigh. "Claire," Olivia began earnestly, "he's just close with another classmate. But you and Ethan have been betrothed since childhood. If he dares not marry you, I'll make sure he regrets it." Her voice was firm, filled with the kind of protective authority only a mother could carry. "Your parents trusted us to take care of you before they passed away. Besides, your father saved our family." I didn't respond right away. I couldn't tell them the truth, that in my past life I had been betrayed by those closest to me, that I stumbled during the college entrance exams, had my entire life turned upside down, and ultimately died in a car accident orchestrated by jealousy and malice. They exchanged a glance before shaking their heads in exasperation. "You're so stubborn," Olivia finally said with a sigh. "Fine, we'll cancel the engagement banquet." And just like that, the banquet, still in its planning stages, was gone. Letting out a small sigh of relief, I stood up and bowed deeply to both of them. I knew they meant well. By all accounts, Ethan was the model student in everyone's eyes, the perfect son. Even his own parents couldn't understand why I was so insistent on canceling the engagement. But I couldn't explain. After the engagement was officially called off, Olivia and Mr. Johnson told me I would always be their daughter, even without the formal arrangement. I didn't tell them that I planned to leave their family after the exams. For now I stayed, determined to see through the next 2 months with quiet resolve. In the days leading up to the exams, Olivia insisted on driving me to school. She held my hand tightly, her voice trembling with emotion as she urged me to study hard and promised to visit me often. When I unpacked my things at school, I discovered she had slipped a thick wad of cash into my bag. Tears streamed down my face. Olivia must have noticed that my room was slowly being emptied, but she chose not to confront me. Instead, she let me carry out my plans, respecting my decisions like a quiet guardian. I opened my suitcase to retrieve some clothes when I suddenly heard Ethan's voice at the door. "Is Emily still upset?" he asked, clearly expecting someone else. I turned to see him standing there, his face visibly startled when he realized it was me. "Claire, what are you doing here?" he asked, confused. I gestured toward the room next door. "Your room is over there." At that moment, the door to the neighboring room opened slightly, and Emily peeked out. She offered me an awkward smile before retreating back inside. I looked at Ethan. Guilt was written all over his face. After a moment of hesitation, he said, "Emily's home situation isn't great, and she lives far from the school. With the exams coming up, I thought it'd be easier for her to stay here since we're close to campus." I hadn't expected things to progress to the point where they were sharing a roof, and apparently a bed. Ethan seemed to sense my silence. After a pause, he added, "Right. Why don't you move your stuff into my room? You can stay there for now. I'll take the floor." As he spoke, he opened the door to his room and looked inside. "By the way, what happened to all the books in your room? You used to have so many." I picked up one of my textbooks and pursed my lips. "Well, this villa is yours after all. It doesn't matter to me where I stay, as long as I'm not treated like a guest." "I've already finished those books," I said casually. "They weren't useful anymore, so I got rid of some of them." He frowned. "Even if the exams are only 2 days away, you might need those books later. Why would you sell them?" I didn't respond. "What about the engagement?" he asked after a beat. "What did my parents say?" "They said the timing wasn't right. We'll talk about it later." This was the excuse I had agreed upon with Olivia and Mr. Johnson to delay the engagement. Once I moved all my belongings out and settled back into my new home, I planned to have a proper conversation with him about it. Ethan seemed satisfied with the explanation and didn't question it further. He nodded lightly and muttered, "All right. If that's the case then." He stepped out, saying he'd handle moving some things and that I didn't need to worry about it. I looked at the nearly empty bookshelves. Only a few martial arts novels we had read together remained. For a moment, I considered returning them to Ethan, but my thoughts were interrupted by the sound of laughter outside. Ethan's voice was deep and calm. Emily's was playful and coy. Mrs. Smith's was kind and cheerful. The three of them seemed so at ease, as if nothing had changed. I sat back down silently. Sharing a room with Ethan was already inappropriate, even if the engagement hadn't been cancelled. But with the college entrance exams just 2 days away, leaving now would only cause unnecessary drama. Ethan would surely make a fuss. I decided to wait until bedtime to quietly set up a spot for myself on the living room couch. After studying all day, I wanted to sleep early. However, Emily, full of energy, was lounging in the living room in a silky nightgown, pulling Ethan aside to help her with her questions. Ethan glanced at me briefly before coaxing her upstairs. Yet their laughter and conversation carried through the walls as if intentionally loud enough for me to hear. Feeling suffocated, I stepped outside for some fresh air. "Claire, why are you out here in the middle of the night?" called the neighbor from her window. "Aren't the exams soon? You'll catch a cold." The neighbor, whose husband worked in real estate, had a comfortable life. She often brought me little souvenirs from her trips abroad, treating me kindly. The house was stifling, I replied with a small smile. She leaned over the balcony, her tone exasperated. That Ethan. I swear he seems so devoted, but look at him now, bringing some other girl into the house right before your big exams. And you, why don't you put him in his place? You're too nice. The two of you are practically engaged, but you're letting this slide. If you let him get away with it now, he'll think he can walk all over you in the future. Her words were sharp, but I only half listened. Apparently, Ethan had told everyone that I had suggested bringing Emily home because of her poor family circumstances and long commute, claiming I wanted to help her focus on studying. I laughed bitterly to myself. Clearly, Ethan was just trying to save face, using me as a shield to fend off criticism. But since I was planning to leave soon, I didn't want to waste energy on meaningless arguments. I nodded politely and said nothing. The next morning I left for school early. The neighbor saw me off, urging me again to talk some sense into Ethan. I just smiled and waved goodbye. When I arrived at the classroom, there weren't many students yet. I took out my notebook of mistakes and reviewed a few questions. But then I noticed something that didn't belong to me. A shiny, conspicuous watch placed in plain sight, pushed to the corner of my desk. Ah, Ethan! Emily's panicked voice rang out as she frantically searched her bag. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. My watch is gone. I held the watch in my hand, intending to return it. But the moment Emily saw it, a glint flashed in her eyes. She suddenly lunged toward me, slapping my hand hard. The watch flew out and landed on the floor with a clatter, drawing everyone's attention. The murmurs began immediately. Isn't Claire the one raised by Ethan's family? How could she steal someone else's things? Even if she dreams of marrying rich, a dog's nature can't change. Emily's voice followed, soft and tearful. Ethan, there must be some misunderstanding. Claire must have her reasons. Her tone was so innocent, so considerate, just as I remembered from my past life. She always appeared harmless, but her words twisted the truth and planted doubt in others' minds. Ethan frowned deeply. Claire, do you know that stealing is a crime? You could go to jail for this. Emily's friends quickly chimed in. Emily, why are you defending her? Someone like that probably has her eyes on more than just your watch. To pull this right before the exams, she must be trying to mess with you on purpose. Another student added with disdain. She's just jealous that Emily and Ethan are close. But that doesn't excuse breaking the law. She could ruin her entire future. More voices joined in. You never really know people, do you? We should just call the police. I stood silently amidst the accusations, the chaos swirling around me, feeling the all-too-familiar sting of betrayal. I picked up the shattered glass-covered watch and said calmly, Sure, call the police. After all, the only person who really knows how this watch ended up in my drawer is the one responsible. Barefoot doesn't fear wearing shoes, I thought. Sure enough, Emily's face turned pale as she clung tightly to Ethan's sleeve. No, don't call the police, she stammered. That wouldn't be good for Claire. She's about to take her exams too. Her friends, however, weren't so kind. Emily, you're too soft-hearted, one of them said. People like her will just take advantage of your kindness. Soft-hearted. I let out a bitter laugh. Then suddenly I raised my hand and slapped Emily across the face. The sharp sound echoed in the room, leaving her stunned and speechless. Pathetic, aren't you, Emily? I said coldly. Do you really not know what you've done? Do you need me to air out all your dirty deeds for you to feel satisfied? Ethan, seeing her cheek rapidly swell, immediately pulled her into his arms. Claire, what's wrong with you? Have you lost your mind? He demanded. Lost my mind? I laughed bitterly. That's rich. She's the one accusing me of theft right before the most important exam of my life. You want the truth. Check the security cameras. They'll tell you everything. A few students who had remained neutral began to speak up. Yeah, let's just check the cameras. That'll clear everything up. Ethan's expression darkened, but he muttered, Claire, there's no need to deny it. I can pay for the watch. I took a step back and sneered. You think I did it, Ethan? You've known me for years. Do you really believe I'm that kind of person? He hesitated. His fingers twitched slightly, as if reconsidering his assumptions. But then the notice came back. The security cameras had conveniently been out of order. I had no way to prove my innocence, and the watch ended up being handed over to the principal. The teacher, aware of the watch's high value, called me into the office. Ethan suddenly appeared and declared, Emily said she won't press charges. The Johnson family's wealth and influence were undeniable. Even the principal couldn't ignore Ethan's words. The teacher looked troubled but had no choice but to return the watch. Emily, of course, put on another performance, crying dramatically for over an hour while Ethan comforted her. He seemed entirely absorbed in her tears, paying no attention to anyone else. Later that evening, Ethan came to find me. Claire, he began, his tone suggesting he wanted to argue. I sat down, waiting for him to speak. He hesitated. His face was stiff and uncomfortable. I'll sleep on the couch tonight, he finally said. I stayed silent. He paused again, clearly unable to hold back what he really wanted to say. Emily is upset, he continued. She cried all afternoon. Couldn't you have just let her be? It's only a couple of days until the exams. Do you really have to be so petty? I let out a cold laugh, which seemed to catch him off guard. He probably expected me to get angry, maybe even start defending myself. Instead, my calmness seemed to annoy him more. Fine, I said, smiling faintly. Whatever you say. This unexpected response made him falter for a moment. The college entrance exams came and went. I walked out of the final exam hall with my head held high, the sun warm on my face. There was no weight pulling me down anymore. No accusations, no betrayals, no lingering looks from someone who had already chosen another path. I had done it. I had reclaimed my future. That night, I packed the last of my belongings. As I zipped up my suitcase, I glanced around the room one last time. The villa had been my home for years, but it never truly felt like mine. Now, it belonged to Ethan and Emily, along with whatever lies they built their little world upon. The next morning I received my exam results. They were beyond what I had ever dreamed. University A accepted me without hesitation. Olivia hugged me tightly when she heard the news, tears in her eyes. I always knew you could do it, she whispered. You've always been stronger than you gave yourself credit for. Ethan didn't say much. He watched me from a distance, as if trying to understand how the girl who once followed him like a shadow had become someone he no longer recognized. Emily avoided me entirely. And then the final act of justice arrived. Not through revenge, not through anger, but simply through truth. Former classmate reached out to me in secret. She had footage. Security camera clips that had somehow been recovered after all. In them, clear as day, was Emily sneaking into my classroom late at night, placing the watch in my drawer, and slipping away just before dawn. She thought no one would ever know. But the universe has a way of balancing things. I didn't go public with the video. Not immediately. Instead, I sent a copy to Ethan. No message. Just the file. 2 days later, Emily moved out. No dramatic scene, no tearful apology. Just silence. An absence. Ethan tried to reach out, but I politely declined every call. What was there left to say? I had already said everything I needed to long ago. On the day I officially moved into my new apartment near campus, I placed my father's military plaque on my desk, right beside my acceptance letter. Dad, I whispered, smiling. We did it. I wasn't chasing anyone anymore. Not Ethan, not validation, not a life that wasn't mine. I was building something real, something mine. And this time no one could take it from me. Not even death. Because this wasn't just a second chance. It was my rebirth. And I was finally free.